Can you believe it? Can you believe we're doing this thing right now, Ben?
I can't believe we're doing this thing, but we're doing this thing.
We're doing this thing. Folks, we're so glad that you're here today. If you have seen my little face around the internets a little bit, you know that I normally talk about all things cloud. Today, we're here for the episode of what is called AI and You. And who's the you in that, Ben? Who is the you in that? It's everyone who's watching.
The you and that's everyone who's watching. We love having you on this interactive discussion on LinkedIn.
Interactive discussion. Well said, Ben, because folks, you've got a little chat button down below, and I'd love for you to comment. Tell us who you are, tell us where you are. And as we get into this conversation, not just with Ben and I, we got a plethora of guests who are going to come up here and talk about all things AI. But Ben Blanquera, my partner in crime, you've been hanging around Rackspace with me now for, gosh, can you believe it's going to be 2 years coming up, first part of the year? Oh, look, people are showing up. It's really quite incredible. But why don't you introduce this thing that we're doing here today?
Hey, unless you've been living in a rock in a jungle, the word of the year is AI, right?
AI.
But here's the thing, right? Lots of people are talking about it, right? But then the question is, how do I do it? Right? and so you got a lot of organizations saying, how do I do this thing? And by the way, how do I actually get value out of this thing? Right. And so, what we realize is, why don't we take a leadership role working alongside some of our collaborators like Women in Analytics, International Institute for Analytics, and Chief Data Officer Magazine, because all our members are talking
leaders in the space, absolute leaders in the space.
And you know what? We are doing a industry first collaboration.
Yeah.
Created an educational series focused on how do we responsibly adopt AI. And guess what? Not only today, I am thrilled we're going to have Reagan, we're going to have Brian, who are leaders of the organization, but over the next several months, this is going to be an ongoing series because this is going to keep moving and evolving, right? We're going to bring in practitioners, right? This is not going to be an academic discussion. This is going to be like, how do we make this happen discussion so that, that Gartner hype curve that everyone goes into trough of disillusion, we're going to arrest that trough of disillusion by working together. And so that's what this is. This is going to be a industry first collaboration around how do we responsibly adopt AI based on learning faster together.
That's right. And, we've come up with this plan to go over the next several months, as you mentioned, of all this content we want to share. But we realized in some of the planning that we can't plan out that far. This market is moving way too quick. And there's so much that's changing. It's also why we wanted to have this last for a good long time to keep it current, keep it green, so that we may find we dip back into some of the topics we cover in the early days just to refresh them of the content that's there. But it's not just us today, Ben, is it? We've got some friends who've come along on the party.
Oh, absolutely. First of all, for those of you who have come online, thank you. We have some wickedly smart people on the line, so I hope we can make this interaction.
That's right.
So everyone, please intro yourself and what do you want to get out of this series? All right. Put that in there as well. But before we get going here, I want to introduce Reagan and Brian, and let's put them on stage so they can introduce themselves because, they're the really smart ones. We're just the interested ones.
They are the real smart ones. Before we get to them, we're going to actually acknowledge some of these people who are following instructions so very, very well. So Brian from Bridgepoint, love me some Bridgepoint, by the way. Thank you for being here. And who else? We've got Denise. We've got here from Los Angeles. I saw South Africa show up. We've got Houston. Michael, you follow me everywhere, which is fantastic. I love that you're here. So people continue. We'd love for you to continue to introduce yourselves, who you are and where you are. And then engage in the conversation. And what Ben actually just asked, what do you want to get out of this? So, Reagan, would love for you to introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be a part of this series. Hi, everybody. I'm Reagan Avon. I'm the founder of Women in Analytics, also co-founder and CEO of Align AI. Just a little bit about Women in Analytics. We're an industry association that's focused on putting more diversity into the data, AI, and analytics space. We host a conference. We have membership. We're basically promoting tons and tons of thought leadership from diverse individuals in this space. So if you're interested, definitely check us out at womeninanalytics.com. I'm also, as I mentioned, co-founder and CEO of Align AI. we help companies get value out of AI quickly and safely.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Brian, no stranger to the live streams. Why don't you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. My name is Brian Samsel. I've spent my career in this data and analytics space, and I'm currently the Vice President of Analytics Strategy at the International Institute of Analytics, or IIA. And we've been partnering with data and analytics leaders for years, coming alongside them and helping their organizations get value out of their data and analytics efforts.
Fantastic. Now, gang, can you believe the reach that we have here already this morning? I mean, all over the place. I saw Mason, Ohio show up, and I love Mason, Ohio, because one of my good friends lives up that way.
Hey, Jeff, before I forget, first of all, I saw Cocoa Bay.
I saw Cocoa Bay too.
Can we please have a location there? But before we get, I forgot to introduce Fair by Rackspace, right?
What is a Fair by Rackspace?
Fair by Rackspace. So Fair by Rackspace, building on 25 years of heritage, we are a spin up within Rackspace focused on accelerating the responsible adoption of AI for enterprises. So that's that. And by the way, I got a dual hat, and I wish I had two hats on today. I am a global editor for CDO Magazine, which is the leading resource for chief data officers throughout the globe. So I love the fact that I got Women in Analytics, we got International Institute, we got CDO. We're trying to make sure we cover a lot of ground. So I just want to make sure we acknowledge that as well.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. And gang, as we go forward, obviously you can go to any corner of the internet and go, learn a thing about AI. But what we're excited to share here is not only what is the latest and greatest and happening in the space to help you and your organization adopt AI better, but do it in a lighthearted way. Obviously, there's a little bit of rapport between the four of us here on the screen. This will be a core group. There may be some others that ebb and flow throughout this series. But as we get towards the end, we're going to announce when our next one is and what the topic is. So make sure you're sticking around. Keep introducing yourselves over there. I saw Brazil show up. UK is here, New Jersey. Oh, you have a friend, Daniel, unless that's you in two different places. Look at that. Some people who are in it and AI and some people are trying to figure it out. But our goal here today, folks, is really to talk about, when we start to think about adoption and how a company is going to approach AI and tread into those waters, probably even for the first time. We talk about readiness. Readiness applies to so many different things, but let's talk about that for just a second. So, Brian, the whole crew here, Reagan, let's lead with you, actually. Let's think about readiness. When you think about a company being ready to adopt AI, what does that mean?
Yeah, I've spent the last almost decade of my career helping enterprises design, develop, deploy, leverage AI, which for folks that are rather new to this space, AI has been around for a long time. ChatGPT obviously just came out. We're coming on the 1-year anniversary of it here in a couple of weeks. And so I think that got a lot of excitement. It got a lot of exposure. And the number one thing that I always focus on is culture. So I think it's an interesting approach when you're thinking about it from that perspective, because when you hear AI, you think of all these technical things, these technical capabilities that companies need to have in place. You think about data, which we're going to talk about some of that, but culture is one of those things that's really hard to assess. It's really hard to measure. It's really hard to improve. And when you see it, you know that it's there. It's one of those things. When you walk in, you know that they have a culture around it. And what I mean by that is there's trust. There's trust involved with leveraging data. There's trust involved with AI doing what you think it's going to do. There's trust involved in letting AI augment some of your decisioning. And so I always look at the culture, which usually starts with education. Do people know what it is? Do they know how to use it? Do they know what examples exist? Do they know the risks around it? Do they understand how hard it can be? So when I think of readiness, that's usually the very first thing. Are people saying the same thing when they say AI? What are they thinking of? And what sort of culture exists?
I love that you brought culture up because it's one of those things that people don't necessarily think of as a challenge or opportunity when deploying new technology into an organization. Because a change like this is so fundamentally different. It's not like, hey, we've got an upgraded CPU, we're going to put in our servers. Culture doesn't care about new CPUs. They just know their app works a bit better. But when we think about AI, it is one of those technologies that fundamentally is going to change the way people, one, do their jobs, and then two, interact with each other. But Brian, over to you. Anything you want to add into that as far as what Reagan was saying, or your own thoughts about readiness?
Yeah. Well, I think the education piece is great, right? And it's the space is changing so fast, right? And it's hard to keep up, right? I think today is when the GPTs get released to the enterprises, right? I tried to play with them yesterday and it wasn't ready yet. But you think of or organizations, right? We have to learn new skills, right? We have to learn this prompt engineering, right? That's a new skill, right? We have to learn how to make decisions in these probabilistic environments, right? These are new skills. I would say the other thing that really comes to mind is strategy, right? Not only are our AI efforts aligned with our organization strategy, but do we actually have a dedicated AI strategy, right? I think this, you could ask the question, right? Do you actually need a strategy for a technology? But I think, as we're going to see here over the coming months, right? This is so transformative, right? It needs its own strategy, right? It's worth developing that and creating that.
It really does, and that strategy is going to go a long way towards trust. Now, Stephen made this amazing comment. He says trust involves not only trust in the data and AI, but also trust in leadership and trust in each other. And I think it's a great point. And I even call it out, not just because it's a great point, but guys, we're doing as much as we can to ensure this just isn't a talk between four folks who spend a whole lot of time in this space, but a conversation with all of us. So keep your comments coming. We'll grab as many of them as we can. But Ben, I'm going to bounce to you real quick. Let's build on that trust conversation for a moment. And what are your thoughts around trust and how to not just build it, but maintain it over time as it relates to this type of technology?
Sure. Yeah, when you look at sort of this trust, I think there's, as humans, trust starts with this notion that, first it's, I understand what's happening.
Yeah.
Right. Two, it's transparent, right? There's nothing hidden, right? Three, in the AI kind of stuff, there's this notion of sort of like, it's traceable, right? Like I know where stuff comes from, I know who's using it, and then then there's this sort of this notion, because this is so complex, like this notion that there is a set of higher principles regarding doing good with it, right? That there is a set of values that drives why we would do it and governs that, right? Because unless people understand that the people running the ship have a set of values like do no harm. Let's make sure fundamentally we do no harm. Let's make sure fundamentally it's safe for people, and let's fundamentally say what we're going to do and do is what we're going to say, as we say, right? And it's a consistent pattern. Then trust starts building up. So those to me are some of the key things here. Because like in any technology, at the end of the day, it's the human mesh that makes or breaks this thing. And like at this point, ChatGPT has not figured out all the neurons in our brains and how that works. Give it another 5 years. But at this point, trust matters.
Trust absolutely matters. So, Reagan, you have a friend in the audience. You have somebody cheering you on. But I love her comment here as well. It says, look at it this way. Responsible AI is culture, not just a checklist. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, 100%. So we're moving. I was actually thinking about this a little bit this morning. I don't know about any of you, but I go down these like insane philosophical like rabbit holes with AI because it makes you like really introspective around what we're doing here. When we got cell phones, we were offloading part of our memory. We couldn't possibly remember everybody's phone number, everybody's address. We moved from like actual books that we kept that information into our pocket, into our cell phone. So we offloaded some of our memory that we would usually have to recall immediately. And then we are now offloading decisioning into this system that maybe we don't even understand how it works. So I feel like that's the trust piece, the culture piece that I'm talking about. And I think it's great to talk about intentions. I think we need to be really, really conscious about intentions. But the thing that makes me most nervous is the issues that happen with AI that are unintentional and that aren't caught and are really hard to identify. And I think that's why we need to be very proactive about thinking very critically about what could happen and what the ripple effects are. Because what usually happens is when we build these things, we don't think of every possible outcome and scenario. And especially when you have teams that are super diverse in terms of their background, you can't possibly come up with all of the, possible scenarios that could happen. And so really, I've been putting a lot of emphasis on design and user experience. The technology is great. It will follow. It's come a long way. We're making significant strides to do better and see better performance. But I think we're in the age of actual user experience and product thoughtfulness with AI. How do we provide the right level of transparency? How do we design systems to provide the right feedback loops so that we know that it's doing what we want it to do? So I think that's the piece. And it turns out that's really hard. So these companies are trying to figure it out. Yes, they're getting all the technical components put together. We're going to talk about data. That's a huge piece as well. But it's really just this thoughtfulness.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I was just going to jump in there. But Reagan, I mean, isn't it when you just talk about it's a product, right? And there's a product life cycle that needs to be thought about. And that's what we think about when we think part of readiness. Are you thinking about what you're doing as a product? Who's using it, right? What's the risk factors? What's the life cycle? How much investment do you want to put in for basis versus sort of the return you're getting, right? So just sort of this notion of product thinking associated with that, which is a life cycle, right? And I think that you just brought up a really good point about the readiness is do you have product thinking in sort of this notion? Because for example, I know that there's a whole bunch of stuff around risk, right? In risk mitigation and readiness, as you understand the risk and you're looking to mitigate it. But typically that's driven from a compliance and legal sort of perspective. There's a whole other world from a product perspective. And I used to work in a different world that we used to do these things when we developed products called failure mode effect analysis, which is what could go wrong, what's the impact, and then would you even know it's happening, right? And then you create some triage list based on failure modes that is driven from a product end, not a risk and legal end. So I think your points are spot on.
Fantastic. I love it. And so, Reagan, I'm not exactly sure how you fall asleep at night when the brain goes down those philosophical rabbit holes. But folks, no kidding. We have given some thought about some key tenets to AI readiness. And folks, panel here, we had given some thought about lots of things we were going to say about these, but we don't have tons and tons of time left in our session here this morning. So let's be pretty punchy with these answers and move through them, because we want to make sure that we get this list out. Now, we can dive into these deeper in future episodes as well. But Brian, I want to start with you, if you don't mind. We talk about strategic alignment. We've brushed against that when we talked about trust a little bit. But let's talk for just literally a minute. Strategic alignment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you need to be aligned. Your AI efforts need to be aligned with where the organization is headed strategically, right? If you don't have that, it's going to be hard to get the funding you need. It's going to be hard to get the buy-in you need, right? It's going to be hard to get that sponsorship. So, we need to be aligned with, hey, where is the organization headed? And, does our AI efforts align with that? And are we working in the right direction, right? I think we still see, some data and analytics teams that have a build it and they will come approach, right? Or they're kind of off in their own silo building things. And it's really hard to then lift from that silo and bring it back into the business, right? You need that business sponsorship, that partnership right from the very, very beginning.
Yeah. So, and Ben, let's go over to you. As Rackspace has in our FAIR offering, our FAIR spin-up, as you defined it earlier, one of the ways that we help to de-risk AI projects is all around business sponsorship as well. Why don't you define and talk about that for just a second?
Yeah, ultimately, with any initiative, there has to be a unit or a person or a group, a business that owns it, because it's the person who's going to own it and have to operate it that's going to make sure it actually creates the results, right? There's a saying, if everyone's accountable, no one's accountable, right? And
Yeah.
if no one's accountable, guess what happens? Nothing happens, right? And so just at the end of the day, if there isn't a name in that project sponsorship, it's probably not going to work. So
Yeah.
put a name in there and make sure they know their name's there.
Yeah, again, this type of a project is not a let's replace the memory or the CPUs in a server. This is a business-wide impact, and appropriate business sponsorship is super important. Now, Reagan, you've already brushed against this, but our third point that we discussed around being AI ready talks about treating this as a product. Why don't you put some definition around that?
Yeah, I think when you think about these AI systems, I often talk about the difference between software and AI. AI can be leveraged inside of software, but for a long time, we were basically taking software engineers, we were creating logic on our own. So we knew A plus B equals C, or if A, then B, right? We had very specific logic that we could test to see if it was wrong. With AI, we're now grabbing patterns out of data, and we're using those patterns to predict new things. And so the wrongness can be ever changing. And it's almost like trying to run after a moving target. And so when you think about a product mentality on this thing, there's something called model drift that happens for models that go into production systems. And it's when it stops performing well. So think about like if you're in, New Orleans or something, and you're looking at the weather throughout the summer, and then a hurricane happens. This is a catastrophic event that changes everything. So a model doesn't do well if it's trained on sunny days and then sees a hurricane. So these are some of the issues that we run into when we actually see a big change, like the pandemic.
Yeah.
A lot of models ended up being wrong because the pandemic changed a lot. And so when we think about a product mindset, we have to have this ongoing observation and assessment of quality and outputs and the right checks in place so that we don't do harm, or we don't have something just moving on in the background that we don't understand is deviating from what we originally intended. And so I think it puts more rigor around it. It puts more responsibility and accountability for people across the organization. It's not a project. It's not a one and done. It's not a dashboard. It's a product. And I feel like that is part of the cultural topic that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, perfect. I love it. And I've just made a note that we're going to do an entire episode on model drift because I think that would be interesting to listen to. All right, let's move on to our next. It's our fourth item as we crunch through and get all of these in. We will delve into these deeper in future episodes, folks, but I think it's important that we go through these 9 or so items. And this next one for you, Ben, is back to AI literacy and skills. Just deploying a tool doesn't solve the problem. We have to be aware of the intricacies of those tools.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I look at this as like if you're going to travel to a different country, a foreign country, and you wanted to actually be effective in that foreign country, you have to understand the language, you have to understand the culture norms. And so, very much when we think about moving forward with AI responsibly, we've got to make sure folks understand what AI means. They know what the languages are, and so that everyone has a common way of referring and talking about it. So that that's sort of the nutshell of that. So educate the heck out of people.
Educate the heck. And it's literally everyone. When I think about what we're doing here at Rackspace, I mean, anybody from the lowest job to the highest job, CEO included, is doing AI training here at Rackspace.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right, Brian, over to you. AI and cloud platforms. Let's talk about compute and storage as a readiness item.
Yeah. I think, most organizations, as they have been for a little while, right, there's a balance between what do you put in that public cloud, what do you put in that private cloud, right? And that's true with AI, right? And I think every organization kind of has to go through that process of balancing, speed of innovation versus building something that's fit for purpose versus are we locking ourselves in to specific technologies. So it's a big discussion. I think that'll be a good one to dive into later. Even just this morning, I was reading about how many organizations are increasing their focus on data center sustainability, right? Which is just one more element to this, right? And because so many people are seeing, inefficiencies and high energy usage with their own data centers. So I think there's a lot there to weigh and balance, and every organization kind of needs to decide where they want to be on that scale.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, love it. All right. So let's also, Brian, while I've got you on the mic, and I haven't seen your red light blink on your coffee cup that keeps your coffee warm. We've kept you too busy. That's right. I had to call out that Brian has a cup that keeps
still
his
the ideal
coffee
temperature.
warm, which means you're not drinking it fast enough. All right, moving on. Brian, I want to talk about operational readiness as well.
Yeah.
Well, it's not just about the tools, but it's about the people and having this thing ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, exactly. First couple things that come to mind are, do we have an intake process, right, for demand coming in? We were with a client a couple weeks ago. They said they kind of crowdsourced over 1,000 ideas for generative AI, right? And they were going to work on 5 of them, right? So, do we have a process to bring all those in, quickly evaluate them, decide where we move to POC and prototyping? And then also, do we have that change management process in place too, right? We've all probably here been part of projects where we've built something great and it doesn't get used at the end of the day, right? So do we have that change management in place? Can we work with the organization to get them to help them adopt a new way of doing things?
That's right. So, Reagan, you've been the proponent and the champion for the culture and the people, but it really is nothing if we don't have good data, is it?
That's facts. I think of data a lot in the context. So I use this example a ton. So when you're trying to cross the street as a kid and you're learning when to cross the street, you're picking up tons of signals. Your parents are telling you to look both ways. You're looking both ways. You're looking for cars. You're listening for cars. You're looking at the stop sign. So we bring in all this context that creates models in our brain on what to do next. And models are no different. Yeah. They have to reference tons and tons of data and have a lot of context in order to learn the right patterns so that they can give you good predictions. And without good data and without good context, pretty much good is nothing, right? You've got these models that I'm sure most people have heard garbage in, garbage out. That means if we give it bad data or we give it incomplete data, it's not going to have the full picture. So it's not going to be able to understand how to create those patterns and relationships. And unfortunately, a lot of companies are coming to terms with that this year. I talk about data too in the context of a storage unit. For a long time, we were like, data's gold, data's everything. And so people just started hoarding and they were throwing tons of stuff into a storage unit, not caring if it broke, not caring where it went. And now we're spending tons of time labeling things, fixing things, putting stuff in where it's supposed to go, giving it context, creating catalogs, because it turns out the organization and quality of it is very, very important, and especially the context. So if you don't have good data, your models will never understand and they'll never get better. And I always say that is the foundation. Data is the foundation and it's all connected.
That's right. It all builds up from there. So as we get closer towards the end of our list here, Ben, let's bounce back to you. So that data goes into some sort of a cloud foundation, a framework, an environment. So let's talk about readiness of your cloud environment.
Yeah. So much like any environment, we've got to make sure it's governed, right? What are your policies, procedures for who gets to see what? Right. And then how do you know it's actually happening? There's got to be a way for like who gets to spin up what and how to use it, because guess what, folks? This stuff costs money, and every token that goes through, you're paying for. And much like the sort of big cloud, like, oh my God, my cloud bills are so big. Oh, just wait till you start seeing these LLM bills.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
You ain't seen nothing yet. But so governance around sort of there'll be like an AI ops, like FinOps. There'll be an AI ops thing just because if we just look at security and cost, you've got to make sure there's governance and guardrails around that.
Indeed. All right. Last on our list, and should be first on our list, should be in the middle of our list. Security. Brian, readiness around security.
Yeah. If I think of things like security and privacy, there's some new elements here that we haven't had to tackle before, right? So, I think of, just as we spend a lot of time thinking about when we're building models within our organization, right? doing risk assessments, right? Are you able to do that on your vendors' models, right? Are you able to ask for a bias assessment from them? You think about there's new IP being generated, right? If we have custom prompts or instructions that go in our prompts, right? That might be IP for organizations. Are we protecting that? Are we, treating that with the same care or the right care that we should be? And the other thing too, I learned from one of our experts. So much of the focus when we kind of talk about ethics and some of the upcoming regulations is on privacy, but actually representativeness is actually a bigger issue in a lot of instances, and it's something we need to keep an eye on there as well.
All right, I have a favorite quote that's shown up in the chat here. Keith, you win, and I'm going to read it verbatim here. If you suck at IT, you will suck at AI. If you suck at UX, you will suck at AI. If you suck at data, you will suck at AI. All of those things are the foundation and the building blocks. And if you think that's some interesting stuff, this is the show for you. We'll be back on December 6th. We're not done yet, but just reminding you, on December 6th, we're back to have more conversations about this. But Keith, you win. We're going to make T-shirts about that one, by the way.
Yeah, that's a T-shirt.
Show, I think. Absolutely. We don't have time to go in depth on this last comment that was made, but it is worth addressing. And Reagan, I'm going to hand to you to talk about the executive order from the Biden administration.
Yeah, absolutely. So last week, the Biden administration issued an AI executive order. There was also the AI Safety Summit in London last week. And I did a big recap on this on LinkedIn, so feel free to go there if you'd like. It's 111 pages. I've seen a lot of my AI friends use AI to summarize.
So if you can't sleep like Reagan, here you go.
My high-level summary and opinion on it is we should continue regulating outcomes and holding people accountable for outcomes. I think we're trying to over-regulate the process and over-regulate the how, and that is going to end up having pretty severe consequences, in my opinion. And so I think we're getting too hung up on licensing for large language models and what these things can do. And I used a quote, it's like, if people can try to build houses on sand and sell those houses on the market, but there's issues with that. Now, we aren't going to regulate not building house on the sand potentially. We might put some other regulations around that in terms of its stability and foundation, but we should lean further away on regulating on process and lean further more into outcomes and accountability.
A great answer. And folks, we will not only cover this more in depth in a future episode, it will be a common thread throughout all episodes. Our goal in this is to come to you at a regular interval and talk about AI in real time. It's our intent here. So our next episode is December 6th. Marks your calendars now. We're going to actually, you may have figured this out. This is a chatty group. We're going to start about 5 minutes early and banter so that we can rock on the content right at 9 o'clock and be ready to roll through. So I want to thank Brian, Reagan, Ben for being a part of this. What a great group of folks, a diverse group of not only individuals, but organizations here from from Rackspace, the women in analytics to CDO Magazine. All the groups are here, and we're so grateful. As we go out, everyone will bring up a QR code slide where you can get more information on everyone. But again, I'd love for you to mark your calendars. December 6th, we will be back for the next episode. We will mark it ridiculously on LinkedIn, so it will not sneak past you, mind you. Not with this group of folks. So, all right, we're already late. We're going to go just a tiny bit longer. This is the lightning round. You have 15 seconds, each of you, to make a closing AI point. Now, I'm going to give it to Reagan first. That means that Brian and Ben get a couple of seconds. So, closing thoughts, 15 seconds or less, Reagan.
Yeah, education is key. Make sure your organizations are educated. Start there. And build a plan, create a roadmap, have a strategy.
Rock and roll. Ben.
How do I follow that? Whatever Reagan said.
Okay, you went for less than 15 seconds.
Data. What the outcome is just the tip of the iceberg about all the things in the stack that need to happen to get that outcome. So don't forget about the stack and don't worry about the shiny squirrel, worry about the journey to get there. You gotta have good
Love
stuff.
it. Awesome. Brian, over to you to close us out.
Yeah,
No,
I'd say
really, I get to.
Make sure you're using these tools yourself, right? Make sure your leaders are using them. They are changing quickly. I used Dolly this morning to generate an image, and my wife was shocked at it, right? Because she asked me how long it took. I was like, I don't know, 2 minutes. So use these tools, get comfortable with them, make sure your leaders in your organization are doing the same.
Fantastic. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed your time with us here this morning. My closing comment for you with AI, it's really easy. If you suck at IT, you're going to suck at AI and all the other things that Keith said. So thank you so much for being a part of our inaugural AI in real-time episode, everyone. We have some great guests here this morning. You guys in the audience were the best ever. So chatty, so thoughtful, so encouraging. Thank you so much for that. We'll see you on December 6th.